Hi, and welcome to another episode of If It's in the Mind, It Can Be Managed. And today on the Mind Management Mentors podcast, we're going in a different track. I try getting as many different varied guests, and today is going to be all about growth, um, how we can strive. I always say this a lot in a lot of my LinkedIn posts: is are we striving? Or are we surviving or are we thriving? Because a lot of people find themselves stuck just trying to survive. And we're all going to talk about thriving today. So, Joey, welcome to the podcast. Tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Joey Chandler. I'm a growth coach. I live in Reno, Nevada, and I help people grow in the areas of their life that is important to them by using a combination of core values, celebration, and action. And what I found is that people always have we all have core values. And my fundamental belief is that our core values represent who we are at our best. And the more that we can bring our best self to any situation, the more likely we are to grow, take action, and succeed in whatever which way that we want to succeed.
Perfect. Joey, we're going to deep dive core values because it's a core part of life coaching and coaching to get people moving forward. And I think I know when I went through my core values when I first started coaching, I found it so powerful to understand that all the things that had upset me in the past was because I was not aligned to my core values. And for anyone who is going to be going through core values with yourself, Joey, I think it's such a powerful tool and it becomes part of the blueprint for so many things in our life. So when it comes to core values for you, how were you first introduced to them yourself?
So, back 10, 12 years ago, I had done, corporate trainings where you go to pick a core value list of, here's 50 words, get them down to 20, get them down to 10, and get them down to, some number. And it was always great in the moment, but like most people, by the time the workshop was done, I had forgotten what they were, and certainly by the next day. And I went through a variety of things, but I started to see, I eventually got my core values down to five things. And that was like, I was like, okay, this is great. And I was working on it, but then in January of 2022, I burnt out. I was going through divorce, living alone. It was post-COVID, it was right after COVID, just a bunch of stuff. And I woke up one day and I said, I cannot be anything but me. I just don't have the energy anymore. And the irony is that I had a sense of core values. I was like this, and I was like, something is not working here. And um, and I said, okay, well, if I can only be me, then who am I, and how can I be more of that? And I started a little bit of a journey. And fortunately, within a couple of weeks, I had a conversation with a friend of mine, and he told me a story about the U.S. Navy SEALs, the military, and they put everything in sets of three. And they said, just because it's easier to remember. And apparently, when you're getting shot at, three things are easier to remember than anything else. And at the time I had these five core values, and literally it was like this level of transformation was like, oh, screw it. If or three is easier, I'll just do that. And I took them down to from minders, courage, connection, and curiosity. And from that moment, or very, very close to that moment, I could wake up each day and say, how could I bring some courage, some connection, or curiosity to my day? And at the time when I was burnt out, it was like, okay, the courage is I'm going to get up, go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, and get back into bed. Like that was about as much courage as I had, because that's all the energy I had. Because when you're burnt, you're burnt. And but I kept doing that, and because it was so easy. Three things are easy to remember, and you could take a baby step. You can take a baby step, take a baby step, and within a few months, I actually had recovered from burnout. And I was like, I woke up one day shocked. I was like, wait a minute, I'm recovered. What happened? Because I hadn't done yoga, I hadn't done meditation, I hadn't like intentionally journaled or any of the things that you normally would include in an anti-burnout routine. I just kept saying, how can I be more of myself, essentially? And what I realized is that being anything but who you are is just exhausting. And it doesn't matter how successful you are, how much you struggle, anything. If you can't be yourself, you will eventually burn out because it just takes energy. And what I started to see is that we all have far more experience being who we think we should be rather than who we actually are.
Yeah.
So I do a process, and you went through it. The other thing that for me, core values. when the more I started thinking about it, core values have been with us for a long time.
Yep.
They aren't something that just shows up in a workshop. And I find a lot of those workshops, you end up taking words that are more intellectual. I call them adultified. Words that sound good, and but they may not be ones that have landed with you when you were young. And I want those young ones because that's wherever whatever we have at our core, whether it's love or joy or happiness, and wherever it came from, if it's a spirit, a soul, a God, or maybe it's just the way the human body, that's part of evolution is they create those things. When we tap into that, that's just us being our best self. And that was there when we were young, even if we didn't know the language of it. So I try to help people bring in something that is like fun, like, it has some, and I usually encourage people to have like something like creativity or play or fun, because I think that, it's not everything, but it is part of who we are. And the more we can use that, again, we find solutions to the problems.
Going even deeper on core values, and for everyone that's tuned into this and they'll be like, "Gee, I don't even know what how do you pick your core values?" How I know the power of core values, and they are genuinely the cornerstones, the alignment of how we can be. And I'll kind of veer in a different direction. Most people don't know who they are, and they're living this place of I will people please to be something that outside validation that I think they need to be. And it's exhausting and it's overthinking, it's anxiousness, it's constant stress. And I've said this many a time before, a lot of us, and myself included, many, many years ago, we live in a place of let me please these 100 people around me. And we forget that trying to change the mindset of these 100 people around us, or living in that place where I need to please those 100 people around us, deflects away from the simplicity of self. And most people don't know themselves, Joey, right?
Yeah, I take a little bit of a little bit of tweak on that. Like most of us, and I would say even actually, no matter how well you know yourself,
Yeah.
there are places in your life where you live true to who you are,
Yeah.
and there's places in your life where you don't. Because I know I'm not perfect. I'm guessing I'm going to assume that maybe you're not perfect in being your full self 100% of the time.
According to my
And-
wife, I'm far from it.
exactly. Exactly. And so, and to me, this is the interesting part when I started doing this work is I realized that people are actually living true to their core values more than they realize.
Yeah.
Not as much as they want, absolutely not as much as they want, but much more than they think. And when we clarify their core values, get them down to those three words, they're able to look back in their life and see these stepping stones, the little places where like, hey, you know what? I really did live that. Wait a minute, I was there. I had this story. I did this. I'll never forget this. I did this call of a woman. It's been a few years. I forgot her name, but she was an owner of a large. She had been an owner of a large furniture store, and her husband had been like the face of it, but it turns out she had done all the work,
Yeah.
and it was that sort of thing, and she came in and I was like, why do you would like to talk to me? She's like, well, I don't know, what to do next after this because she sold the store and that sort of thing. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, we're going to figure out our core values. It's going to help you determine what's next. And she's like, no, this won't matter. I already, there's no way you can help me essentially, like, because I've been this way for how 60 something years and there's nothing. And I was like, okay, well, let's just go through the process and we'll find something. and and we go through the process and it turns out she was about excited and then I forget her exact core values, but we kept talking about it and she's like, oh, and I did this and I did this, and she just started seeing this life, all these places where she was living true to her, where she was. And I was like, awesome. We got to the end of the call. It's like, okay, great. Would you like to set up another call so that we could, go a little bit further? And she's like, no, I think I'm already living true to my core values. Like she went from thinking that her core values were never able to be found to like, oh, I'm already living true to them in one call. And I was like, wow, I did my job well. I mean, I didn't get any business out of it, but and and so I think it's I think 100% true that we are all not living 100% true to our core values, and there are places to improve.
Yeah.
And our core values are so powerful and much closer to the surface than we realize that they influence our actions and interactions with people in ways that you can look back and say, you know what? That was absolutely me living true to my core values. And that was an area where I wasn't.
Yeah. I and it's so true when it comes to core values, and I like I did your assessment before it came on, and I thank you very much for what you said about that, because I know that when I turn up authentically, and I would suggest I do that 8 times out of 10. To be fair, I would say 8 times out of 10 I turn up authentically. It can be quite jarring for people, and that's what pulls people back from, again, it comes to that outside validation, doesn't it? It's like when I turn up authentically as me, I know that's going to piss people off. So great, we've got as core values, but then we have to need to work on that next part, which is how to feel comfortable being the person that is going to trigger people, or to I always remember a powerful saying, and I know you'll jump on this as well, is when I shine, you'll cast shade. When you cast shade, that's where the negative uh comments come from, and when you're aligned to your values, we shine, we glow, but that does cause other people to not be able to shine, and to then genuinely start the criticisms, the negativity, and all those kind of things. What's your thoughts on that, Joey?
Yeah. To me, it comes down to being yourself, living true to your core values is
Yeah.
it's a muscle, it's a practice. It is literally like working out. There are places where you're really good at it, and you can. And I like to think like, how can I say what I want to say in a way that leaves myself and others people present to my core values of courage, connection, curiosity. Like if I can say what I want to say and do what I want to do, but do it in a way that we're both of us are aligned to it. That's me being at my very best. Because obviously, I want to. There are times when you want to challenge someone and leave them a little bit like wondering. There's that side, but in general, I would love if I was help if I walked around and people like walked away feeling more some version of courage, connected, or curious in some way. And that takes practice. Because again, most of us think we have to be a certain way, especially like in the business world. You're like, I got to be all whatever, this is my manly voice, like I got to be more of this way or I got to be more of that way. And rather than trying to be like, what do I have to be? It's like, who am I and how can I be more of myself in this situation? And that really comes down to practice. And this is what I learned in when I burnt out, and I was asking myself, how can I bring courage, connection, and curiosity to my day? What I was doing, and I didn't know this, was I was building a practice. I was building a system. And a few months after I recovered from burnout, and I'll be honest, I went hog wild into core values. I was like, core values, core values. Like it was a little bit much. Like just be very clear. I got very, very excited. But I started to notice that with myself and my clients, I wasn't producing the results that I wanted. I had recovered from burnout, which was a huge win. But in terms of applying them to furthering my business and my relationships and friendships and stuff, there was something missing. And I kept thinking about it. My brain, my curious brain kept going like, why isn't this working? And I realized that there's a difference between who we are and how we operate. And so what we have to do is figure out how to bring who we are into how we operate. So then I sat down and said, okay, how do we operate? And I came up with a general. I interviewed a bunch of people, and I came up with a general plan. Right, it's like you set a goal, you say, okay, what is and isn't working in that goal, what's the plan, what actions can we take, and then you say like, how can we celebrate our efforts? And
Yeah.
I, and, like very simple, like that's there's nothing remarkable about that, but that's generally what a lot of people do. And I started doing that. I was like, okay, and so the plan became, how can we use our core values in creating the plan? What do our core values say to do? And that was really powerful. It moved along. But after a few months, I was like, this isn't producing the results that I wanted to. And I was talking to people, and they were like, my clients would get on the call, and they'd be like, oh, I'm a little bit bummed about this and this. I'm like, we have celebration as part of the step. Why aren't you present to celebration? And talking to people and looking at my own self, I was like, wow. And I realized is that when you have celebration at the end, you're either too exhausted because you've done all the work,
Yeah.
you're too self-critical, like, oh, that what I did wasn't good enough, or I should have done more. You're too judgmental of yourself. Like, it's just, someone else should, it's only counts if someone else celebrates me.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Why don't we move celebration to the front? And all my clients were like, can we do that? I'm like, it's ours. We can do whatever we want. And so we moved celebration to the front. It was a total game changer. So now we always celebrate first. What did I do? What can I celebrate about yesterday? What are my goals? What isn't working? What do my core values say to do in that situation? And then what actions can I take today? And it turns out celebration triggers dopamine. It gives you a sense of I can do itness, self efficacy, and it lays the foundation for you to be able to do all of those things. And that once that fell into place, like everything changed in terms of being able to work with people no matter where they're at. They can be totally excited, totally bummed, but we always start. What did you celebrate about yesterday? Because everybody has some win, and it gives them a little bit of boost. What's the goal? And we just go through the process.
I love that, and it's funny because I work with teenagers as well, and one of the big questions that I ask when I'm working with teenagers is, "Who are you?" And they can't answer that question. They'll say, "Oh, my friend thinks I'm this," or "My parents think I'm this," or, and I'm like, when we're talking core values for anyone listening to this, and businesses have core values, and then we always the power of core values, and I'm sure you'll agree, Joey, is they can give you a place to be guided to and a place to start from. So there's a connection point, and most people don't understand that. And a lot of people are walking around, and if you ask them the question, "Who are you?" they'll look at you, go, I don't know. And that's a loss of identity for people. If they don't know who they are or what they're aligned to, that's where overthinking comes from. That's where anxiousness comes from. That's where burnout comes from, because you are constantly running on that system and a blueprint that's not yours in the first place. And that can be challenging for people, right?
Oh, 100%. It's 100%. And it is and I don't blame anybody for not knowing their core values. I blame that
Oh,
we haven't been asked enough.
yeah,
And we haven't been asked in enough way. I think the core value work that has been done over the past, was it 20 or 30 years now, especially because it started a lot in the corporate world,
yeah,
again, it's just way too intellectual.
yeah,
And the problem with corporate core values is that we don't have enough experience with them personally.
yeah,
Because at some point, push comes to shove, I'm in a job, I got a deadline, I'm gonna fall back to my own personal core values because I have way more experience with them than even if I have like the Mona Lisa of corporate core values, I'm going to fall back on mine
yeah,
just because I just have more muscle memory with those.
yeah.
So I haven't done this, and I haven't explored this, and I'd be curious what you think, but I almost thinking that uh, it'd be more helpful for companies to help their employees figure out their personal core values and then how to apply them to their job rather than trying to teach them the corporate core values. I think you say, hey, here's our mission, here's our vision. What are your core values? How do they tie into that mission? How do they tie in that vision? And how can you use your best self? Because again, your core values represent who you are at your very best. And if you if I'm a boss, I want my people to succeed. Having them be their very best can only help me win.
That's absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I completely understand that. And if you're facing stress and burnout, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this, Joey, but when people are at work and they know what their business's core values are, and I've worked with businesses like this, by the way, this is one of the biggest challenges that I've worked with when I work, because I work with staff and the employees within the business and the managers, and they all, when the toxic environment that they're working in, or the place has gone down, we think there's this massive change that they have to make. But when you ask the employees and the managers, why is it you're struggling or not moving forward, or what, they'll always come out with the same things. Is like, I get business core values and I understand the core values, and I don't mind living to those core values, but they're not living to the core values. It's like,
Yeah.
you see the leadership teams and the directors of the business not living to the core values that they've put in place for us all to strive to. And you'll agree that employees, staffs, and managers, they're not stupid. They are, when you're not living aligned to something that's quite clearly in front of you, you look at it and you go, I'm not doing it if they're not doing it. So they go back to their own core values, which is why there's that misalignment. So let me ask you a question, Joey. Do you think for a business, do you think they would be better hiring to make sure that the new employees would match to the business core values? Or do you think, like you said, let's see how we can get their core values and are they going to be aligned with ours, changing that? Because it would technically would increase and slow down the hiring possibility, but it would mean that you're making the net smaller to get the right people into the job.
Yeah, I think given the all the evidence that we have that corporate core values are very, very difficult
Yeah,
to really enact over time. I mean, we just don't have, I mean, all the evidence. There's so much research that says people, and our anecdotal research is the same, that people get the idea of corporate core values, but they're like, it's not showing up in my life, and they get angry about it, right? Like
oh,
they get, and there's just so much. I just don't see a lot of evidence that a lot of core value consultants will point to different things, but when
yeah,
you look at the research and when you and your again your own anecdotal experience, I don't hear a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, my corporate core values really made a difference in my life, in my business," and
correct.
I just don't hear that. So I think again I think it's because we all fall back and also to like the leaders who create the corporate core values, there are places where they are living true to them. Again, nobody's perfect. Nobody's 100% perfect or 100% bad. There are places where they're living true to them, but they don't have the experience living true to them themselves as the presidents and stuff. So they struggle just with like anyone.
Yeah,
So I think, and again, I'll be honest, I haven't done a ton of work on this, so I don't have a lot of research, but I think you create a vision, you create a mission of what you're trying to do, and then you ask people, you help people get in touch with their own core values, and you say, hey, how do your core values connect with this?
yeah,
Where do you see the connections? Where do you see the disconnects? And then people would be able to say, okay, hey, these are my core values, and then, mission is this is the connection. You could have a conversation about it.
yeah,
And then management becomes, Mr. Or Mrs. Employee, your core values are XYZ. How can we use them to help you be more effective at your job?
yeah. That's a
Now
powerful.
there's some challenges with that because you want to have a sense of team and all of that. But again, I think you speak more to the mission and the vision that you're trying to create. Keep people engaged in that and have that be I think of American football team, right? We got the Super Bowl coming up. They set up for the beginning of the year, we're going to win a Super Bowl or we're going to, win whatever. That's their mission. And they use the core values. And you actually brought up a really good point that back and forth between the foundation, they provide the foundation and the goal.
Yeah,
And I don't think people get that at all.
no, no.
People think of core values as like this idyllic, like I have to be perfect at it. And we're just not. There are places where you are and there's places where you're not. And if you can get that back and forth, it gives you a sense of power and a sense of energy. But again, if someone really shows here's the corporate core values and they absolutely work, I'm all ears. But I just don't see that evidence very often.
Yeah, yeah, no, I definitely, again, for people, I generally want people to come and say, right, I want to work with Joey because I need to understand. I want some growth in my life. I want to move forward in life. And I don't even know what my core values are or where to start. Because you can do a core value test anywhere, to be fair. It's the conversations you have with a coach that help you open and move up into that kind of that journey into growth, which can be uncomfortable for people. So I'm gonna go political now, Joey, if you don't mind.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
I'm gonna ask you, as an experienced person of core values, what is your new if people because we talked about this before we start, if people are feeling uncomfortable with change, uncertainty in the world, what would you suggest that the political team you have now, what would their core values shout out to you, Joey.
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. And I just want to acknowledge this. I think any theory of any sort
Yeah,
is going, if it's any good, is going to bump up against limits. And you have, and it's in that, in those, and there's going to be some places that you're going to end up saying things because the theory says it's there, even
correct.
though it doesn't quite feel like you're like, and this is where my theory bumps up against some limits. And I want to say this because I'm going to say some things that his in the past, let's say, few months, have caused some fervor among people.
Correct.
Basically saying there's no way that our new president has core values of any
Right.
value.
I thought that was a
You
good
know,
way to go.
right? And here's the part. So I got to go back about 10 or 12 years and explain where my sense of core values comes from.
Right.
Is I had a business where I did tribute videos for people. You're going to do a video for your wife. We get 30 or 40 people saying what they love and appreciate about her. We put them together. You show it at a birthday party or an anniversary. And I did a few hundred of those videos over a few years. Somewhere along the way, I started to see that there was always a theme in the video. The person was about love or joy or happiness or something. And it wasn't loud, it wasn't overt, it wasn't like everybody said the same thing. But because I had kind of an inkling towards personal awareness, and because I spent literally years of my life listening to people say something good about other people, I started to pick up on that theme. And I did videos for people all around the world, 7 to 90, famous people to average grandmas. And it it took a little while, but once I got that, I got it. There was always a theme. And then that led me to develop the questions that you went through to
Yeah.
identify your core values. Because it occurred to me that and at one point, the big turning point was for me is I was having a really, really bad day.
Yeah.
And I was pissed off about something. I don't even remember what I was pissed off, but I was angry about something. And I just paused and I was like, I know if someone did a video for me and got 30 or 40 people saying what they loved about me, there would be put them all together, there'd be a theme in that video. And that theme reflects who I am, even if I'm having a crappy day. And so I was like, damn, I want to be mad. I want to be angry here. I want to be mad. And so what that said to me is that we all have something at our core. Again, where it comes from, I don't know, spirit, soul, energy, whatever, but where it comes from. Now, what that theory also says is that we all have something, including people that we don't like,
Correct.
including people that we really disagree with and have done horrible things. We all have something at our core, and there are places where they live true to it and places where they're not. So I don't. This is a problem. I actually don't know. I'm pretty good at picking up on people's core values because I've
Yeah.
talked to so many people. But if I had to guess Donald Trump's core values, um, I think, and again, this is me
This is
bumping up against
theory, everybody. This is
everybody. This
theory,
is me
not
bumping up
fact.
against limits. I am. This is me bumping against the limits. And if I was coaching him, this is what we would do. We would go through the process. We would identify the core values. Where are you living true to them and not? But um, I get a sense that he is about connection. He is about connection. He's about some sort of success or achievement, like that clearly is there. And I don't know his third one. I usually it's something like creativity or fun or play, but I don't know what that one is. And to me, this is when someone tells so many untruths over and over again, it covers up who they are. It covers
Yeah.
up their core values.
Yeah.
And as someone who spends a lot of time talking to people about core values, the fact that I have a really hard time picking up on like what's true to him, to
Wow.
me says there's a bunch of stuff going on.
Mm.
So, and what that to me says is that here's a person who he has core values somewhere because we all do.
Has to. Yeah.
He has to, like as a part of being human, he has them. But through whatever decisions and actions and interactions he's gone a certain way. Um, and so that's and I have a lot of people that are like, no, and because some people are saying, no, your core values are what you do, and the core values are just making money and world domination and all of these things. And I don't see that to be true because I know that if I did a video for him and got 30 or 40 people that care about him to say what they love and appreciate about him, there'd be a theme in that video. And that theme would reflect something like love or joy or happiness.
Yeah.
And, you know, and it's again, people, this is the funny thing. People are like, how can you say that? Like, because there's a lot of evidence that that's not true. But that having that belief, it actually allows me to work with people because I just know that we will find their core values somewhere and we
Yeah.
know they're there. And if I think if I can find them for somebody like Donald Trump, I kind of believe it actually shows I can do it for a lot of people. And again, please, please don't come after me because I am very, I did a ton of work for Harris. Like with Harris, like Harris, her core values were to me is like very clear. Some sense of like connection, um, uh, 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 contribution or community, and like creativity. Like if she came up and said, "Yeah, connection, contribution, and creativity," you would get that that's her
Yeah.
without even thinking about it. And
Yeah.
this is why I'm like, man, and this is why lying and not telling the truth and not being honest with yourself, it just piles up on top of your core values and doesn't allow you to
Mm.
move forward.
So, I'm talking for so let's move away from people's self-core values. Let's help people to start creating more certainty and growth within their lives because if two people are misaligned with their core values, it causes friction. So if somebody's because I think a lot of people don't understand this about core values, and I know I'm sure you'll agree on this one, is that if you're in a workplace and you don't like somebody, core values is actually a really powerful part to start with to find out why you don't like that person. Because you can genuinely go, what's your core values? Let's find out. Let's see if it's trust, loyalty, and love. Then a powerful question to ask somebody is, what is it about that person you don't trust? And they will literally tell you the story of there'll be something in them that's misaligned with that trust and loyalty within themselves that's askew. But that's the power of core values. Again, it starts helping you become totally aware and recognize that even though I don't like that person, he doesn't appear trustworthy to me. That doesn't mean to say I can't trust myself. So it actually gives that emotional balance a little bit because it helps people understand why they're feeling the emotions they're feeling about all these people around. And a clash in core values is a high probability for people, right?
Yeah, yeah. Uh, yes, it's the awareness. Like for me, when someone says I absolutely can't do something, it drives me crazy because it triggers my curiosity side. I'm like, well, we could do something. I mean, maybe not a lot, but let's talk about what we could do. And when they're like, no, I'm like, it's just, I'm like, wow, I don't know what to do sometimes. But one thing that is actually really an interesting conversation that I do, that I encourage my clients to do is to ask people about your own core values
Mm.
and what they means to them.
Yeah.
Like one of your core values, do you mind if I share?
Yeah,
What,
no, tell everyone
like,
my core values. I don't
you,
mind.
you,
I thought it was very good. I liked it.
yeah, one of yours was achievement, right?
Yeah.
And so you could actually talk to people like, hey, this is what does achievement mean to you, Mr. Friend, or something like,
Yeah.
or what does success mean? Like, because
Nice.
they're going to have a different understanding of achievement as you
Absolutely.
do.
Yeah, of
And then
course.
you could go back and forth, and then that would expand your understanding of what achievement means in the world, and it would just deepen it. And people love to have this conversation because rather than saying asking people like, hey, what are your core values, I say, hey, here are mine. What do you think of these? What does these things mean to you? How do they show up in your life?
Yeah.
And then we form that connection because I'm not putting them on the spot. I'm actually being more vulnerable,
Yeah.
and it starts to build something. And the more you practice speaking to and from your core values, you start to find connections. Like in the political conversations, uh, you know, there's a lot of heated debates. I had a
Yeah.
lot of people. I was very much pro Harris. I had a lot of people who disagreed with me, and
True.
we would, go back and forth. But in those times when when I started to connect with somebody, like just yesterday, I was, on Facebook and somebody was critical of me doing something, and 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 he just said some things where you could just tell he was just really resigned. This was a guy who was a he he was he did a lot of permaculture and he lived off the grid and he wanted to do all these things, but he's like, the powers that be just keep us down. And I just heard a guy who was just, had been pushed down and had struggled to really be himself. He was really working on it, but he was so frustrated that he was just lashing out. And I said, "Hey, tell me more about that thing, the permaculture." And we connected over that because I knew that he had some core values underneath all of that rage. I knew there was somewhere, and I just had to find it. And again, it's just pulling threads and finding things. And that really does take practice. And this is why I tell all my clients, get your core values down to 3, because then you can use them in conversation easier.
Yeah.
If you have 5 or 7, they're just hard to remember. You're not going to use them in conversation as much. You're not going to pull those threads as much, and you're not going to be able to connect with people. So get them down to 3, and just explore. Be curious about them.
Yeah. And it's funny that your core values are all C's: curiosity, connection, and courage.
Yeah, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like I was like, oh, I'm gonna come up with a marketing term. It's just it when I burnt out, like courage and connection were very, very clear to me. Like that was like
Mm.
those were true. And the curiosity one took a little while. I had to play with it a little bit and to find out one that really landed. Now that's been that way for a couple of years now, but um it took a little playing with it. I had to get curious about curiosity, which was the fun part.
When you said curiosity, I was like, wow, that is such a powerful word. And for anyone tuning into this, is like, well, why is curiosity such a powerful word? What curiosity does for the brain, for the mind, and for the soul is it helps you move away from judgment. Instead of having judgment, which is negative, disempowering. And I was having a podcast with somebody else, and I asked them, what's the difference between intuition and judgment? Because that still pops up for me. Judgment still pops up. So a lot of people don't understand the power of curiosity. So when you said curiosity, Joe, I'm like, wow, that's literally disabling judgment within you. And that's such a powerful core value. Um, so curiosity is this beautiful, allows you to be more open, which is everything you've done today, Joey, is be open and really be vulnerable, talking about those core values and the stresses and strains that you had. So as we start just wrapping up and coming towards the end of this podcast, I think it's really powerful. The title of the podcast will be it'll be something about Trump. I'm going to put something about Trump in there. Trump's caught. Does Trump has a core with Joey Chandler? Um, According to Joey Chandler, Trump
Trump
is
has
this.
yeah, Trump's core values according to Joey Chandler. That would be I would get a lot of
So,
uh
for anyone who's
yeah.
going through this, and I think a really powerful thing for core values, and I'm going to reach out to teenagers on this one in case there's any teenagers that tune in onto this one. What would you, working through with teenagers, what would be a really nice statement to help teenagers understand themselves better?
Well, the first thing though is that they have core values.
Yeah,
Nobody tells them this, and we think that but I believe maybe by middle school, certainly by high school, that they have core values,
yeah,
and people are going to tell them like, hey, you got to figure out what to do and all that kind of stuff and live, all. But really, to me, it's like, what are your core values, and how can you make greater use of them in your life?
yeah,
And so just to let them know they have core values, and the world is not going, the world's not out there saying, hey, send me, Mr. Teenager, what's your core values? Nobody's asking kids that.
no,
But if we could do that, we could help them get their core values down to 3. I'll be honest though, it's because it's such a kind of an odd conversation, like kids resist, or at least my son resists.
yeah.
He's like, Dad, stop talking about core values. No other dad talks about that. Um, but here's a funny story. About a year ago, almost this week, I broke my leg. I was rock climbing and I fell and I broke my leg in 3 places. And my son helped me get to the hospital, and it was my leg was broken at the knee and at the ankle. And so like
Oh,
no matter where, you can imagine like there just wasn't a way for me to get comfortable. So I was just in pain. I was moaning. And my son, who was 16 at the time, he goes, Dad, which one of your core values is missing right now? And I'm like, what? Like, and he was kind of being a wise ass. I mean, like it was, but he's like, you're always saying that if there's a problem, one of your core values is missing. So there's a problem here. So which one is missing? And I was like, mother, like just wanted to give him a backhand. But I took a moment and breathed. I was like, you know what? I realized I was really afraid. I was really, really scared in that moment. I just moved to a new town and, all sorts of problems. And uh, so I need to have a little courage. Like, okay, bring some courage. And then the other thing is that I was like, okay, how can I bring some curiosity? And I started thinking, what is having a broken leg going to teach me about life that not having a broken leg was going to teach me about life? And and that got me thinking. And I'll be honest, I don't remember any answers that came out of that, but I do remember that it helped me just kind of stay grounded while the nurses and the doctors were doing all the stuff that they were, had to do.
Yeah.
So I do believe that teenagers can absolutely know and use their core values. We just have to have more conversations about it. And honestly, in my eyes, we don't enough at this point.
Yeah. Joey, thank you so much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I love podcasts because I get to chat to people all over the world. I genuinely love it. And when people bring up subjects, because I always talk about this. I work with kids to titans of industry, and I do trainings for businesses as well. And core values. When you mentioned the core values, and I did the assessment, and it's funny because the first three were what my core values were, or I wanted for other people to feel. And that was different to what it made me feel. Because my first three core values, going on what you said, does it tell you what my first core, or does it tell you the outcomes?
It does, but I actually don't spend too much time on those. But the question that was asked is how when you interact with people, how do you want them to feel?
Yes, that was
And
it. How
and
do I want them to feel?
and those words are usually like safe, heard, motivated, inspired,
Yeah,
all very, very good words,
yeah,
but not a word that you would have used when you were young.
absolutely. Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's why we have the next question, which is when you experience that feeling, when
yeah,
you experience that, what are some words that would describe that? And that's where we get to that thing that lands because we want your core values to land in your heart and your gut, not
absolutely.
not your head.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it was fantastic. Thank you very much. So I encourage everyone to do your test, to be fair, for core values. Joey Chandler, I love your name because it reminds me of Friends. I told you that in the message I sent you. I just
Yep.
feel like I'm talking to two characters from Friends in one person. Joey, is there anything you want to share to the world now to hit and where the core values would ring?
Yeah. Like we live in a wild time right now. We live in especially anyone that live in the United States, and we could have a whole nother conversation about how the United States politics is impacting mindset of people outside of the United States.
Yeah,
But that's a whole nother conversation. But I think we live in a time where there's so many people pulling us in different directions, saying to do this, don't do this, and all that kind of stuff. And I think for our own sanity and for us to really find the answers that we need to find, getting clear on your core values, having a system that you use it on a daily basis, building up that muscle to be yourself and to recognize where you are and aren't living true to that, building all of that up is going to allow us to create the world that we want to create
yeah,
because it's not going to come from leaders saying this or other people. It's us figuring out how to help ourselves and the people around us succeed. And I think that at some point, core values are going to be a part of that. I don't know how, I don't exactly know when, but to me, it seems like the more you can do it early on, and this is the time because like I just did a TikTok on this. Like we are not waiting for 4 years to have a savior show up to save us. We are creating like what we want to create now and tomorrow and today and keep doing that because we have to. We can't wait for someone to show up. We have to create the world that we want. And again, I think that starts with core values.
fantastic. If it's in the mind, it can be managed, and I think we can all agree that Joey Chandler is changing the world one core value at a time. That was a nice segue, right?
That was awesome. That'd be great. Yes, that's a great. Now that would be a title. That title would not get as much interest as Donald Trump's core values.
Absolutely. As always, big love from Cuddy. If it's in the mind, it can be managed. And I can't wait to see you on the next episode of the Mind Management Mentors podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.